Alright guys, welcome to another Q&A slash I gotta do some work. So you can definitely interrupt me while I am messing around. Any questions while what I'm doing, what you have, if you have any data that you want me to, or queries that you want me to look at, explain to you what's happening, what to do better, compare some things, I'm definitely available to do so. Kind of like open office type stuff today. But where I basically am at is I am on this project where I want to take some data from Adventureworks and import it into my master data management system, basically. Hyper-normalized, abstracted data management system. Where all my objects are built by the system itself. So where I am in the process is I have basically over the past couple videos created a very basic model that will generate scripts for me and execute them. So I have all of these different the last video I made sure that I imported as much as I could from Adventureworks itself, and this thing basically is all data driven, and I will filter this again. And each line of code or each kind of container, however you want to view it, is stored in this structure with different metrics or attributes attached to it, whether this specific line represents a data set, what data set does it belong to, is it a synonym, does this data set require that you use the database name in it, do we need to include the schema? So what I had done is try to import as much as I could from the Adventureworks piece. So me executing this piece of code, which this script will build the SQL and then execute the SQL. What it should do is give me the, it's not DB because I don't own it. Let's see, person.country region. So this script basically creates a select statement, executes it as JSON, and returns it to me, and it's supposed to look just like this. So basically that's what I have, my timestamps, the names, and that's what it allows me to do. So what I can do is take this JSON and start mapping it. And that is what I want to kind of work on, where I want to start with person data, because people make the most sense to me, and how I'm going to relate this and ingest it into my people structure. Which will be the people record, which I believe is business entity ID for the system, their primary key for a person. Then I'll have people names, numerics, any sort of additional information that's attached to this I want to import. So it's really kind of designing how will I be doing that. And because I've already built a bot that scrapes SQL or the holidata.net data to get all of these holidays, I can basically start working off of that. My mapping tables, table value function, get mapping. Oh. Let's see, how did I set this up? Okay. So I have it split up by tenant. This is a multi-tenant system, so anyone, I can basically allow people to rent space in the system rather than building your own tables. I mean, everything's very abstract. So I could say, hey, this company owns something specific, like Reddit owns something very specific. So those are my mappings. So I have one for Reddit and one for the FEC data. And I'm going to create another one for Adventureworks. Now I kind of want to think about, I want to create one for Adventureworks. So I need my tenant ID. Should be 10479. I think I use this as one word everywhere. Yep. So how do we want to split this up? It's really looking at what kind of information do I have here. I have a lot of person-based information. What's production? Product ID. So product probably goes to location. Transaction-based stuff. Yep. So more people. How are you linking to a person? More business identity IDs. So only some people are salespeople. Is this some? I hate some of these things. So I'd be curious to see. For no person. Excellent. So business identity is really our, they have like this multi-relationship thing going on. Do I have a business entity namespace? Nope. Do I just have business entity? Nope. Excellent. Okay. So business entity would be my main person. And then depending on any additional information, that's where that filter happens. That's what I'm seeing here. Which is weird. So I have a person, not business entity, that also links to a store. Is that what I'm reading? Does that person work at a store? Is that what we're supposed to think? Are they sales for that? Whatever. We don't know. I'll have to go look that up. Alrighty, so business entity is going to be kind of my root person ID where everything really falls into place here. Is there all my people in here? 19,000. Excellent. Okay. So that's fair. But that still means that I can go from item to item. I can say I'm going to import people first or persons, and then I can go sales.stores, which are really groups or actual stores, but they also have a business entity ID. Not really specific here, but oh well, doesn't really matter. So let's do this. And my realm is 3. So 140793, is that correct? Yep. And I'll have person-based tables. Product-based tables. And transaction-based tables. Which will be our sales, any sort of transactions happening. These are people, really. I mean, how many employee tables do we need? Do we have a sales employee table? No, luckily. We have sales.salesperson. We have a person.person. Do we have person.employee? No. Awesome. So they just spread people out for whatever reason. We don't need to do that. So classes of person, product, and transaction to kind of filter out what type of data I'm looking at. I'll probably need one more for whatever this may be. I'll have to look up some online documentation to figure that out. But this is a good start since we're going to be looking at person. I'll go to my family. What are we going to do? I think I have JSON here. Let's make this unassigned for now in case I need it for a different separation. 7. type will actually be where it's going. So basically, conceptually, what's going to happen is I'll think of two tables. So first name. So through my generate scripts, I'll have two different tables, and this might be something different. I know, but and what I want to do is I want to kind of unify what's coming in and not have to think about if it's coming from this specific area, where is it going to go? Because we have business identity, it seems to be like this overarching primary key across the system. We can actually dictate what type of key from the external to the relationship to the internal system. So we have two types of tables that have been generated. Let's use this. And this would be the data mapping table that I just filled out. I'll just do AWorks for short. And we have an unassigned family. And we haven't filled this out yet. So in this, what we want to do is we want to say, oh, this belongs to the person class. So we know how we're going to be filtering it. We know that we have to look for specific internal person-based items. And each of these names are going to be in the actual mapping table and dictate where they're going to go in the table itself, all through the use of key names. So it's pretty apparent as to their destination. So if we have a name type, that would cover both of these two separate JSON items, and then in the mapping table we will have the actual names of the JSON coming in. So that's how we're going to do it. We're not going to relate it to a specific table. If it comes from this table, this particular JSON is going to go, or key name JSON key matched with a different area is going to go into a separate thing, because we're looking at it from a higher perspective, where this is just people data. So identifier, name, numeric, text, flag. I think I have everything I need in here. What I like to do a lot is use sheets or some sort of spreadsheet, because it allows me to just paste data back into the system. We're looking at ID 7. So this would be the primary key of the type table, and we're just going to remove that. This is who owns this data. And that would be the parent. So 7 would be the unassigned, the Adventureworks person unassigned taxonomy so far. And it'll make a little bit more sense here in a moment. There we go. So going back to what I had originally, if I just hold Control Z, this that didn't return anything, it's because I'm saying it's 14079. Oh. There we go. So now when I run this tree, it's going to give me what's happened, or the typing IDs I need. So in the mapping table itself, like cruising Reddit and uploading FEC files, I have the source of the name in the Federal Election Commission file or in the JSON being returned by Reddit, whether it's a comment, a Reddit, or submission. This is that column name or that JSON key. So I can add whatever I'm getting back. Let me just close these down. Since it's a generic select statement, I'll have first name inside the JSON. First name, middle name, and I'll be adding that here. And then I'll be redirecting where it's going to go, what it needs to, what large, yeah. I'm going to be sorting it. That's what I'm going to do. So many databases into my different places. So like always, I like to just kind of grab a record and move over to a spreadsheet type program, kill the primary key, and basically start filling this stuff out and make sure that I'm typing it correctly. And I'll actually go get those new IDs. It's alphabetical. Let's see if they match up. Address, content, event, flag, identifier, name, numeric, address, content, or contact, event, flag, identifier, name, numeric, text. Sweet. They match up. Because that's what we'll be going right here. And then we'll be classifying it. So I like to keep my names unique. I'm going to prefix it with the table just to see where I run into any sort of duplicates, but it won't really matter. Here we go. So I believe this name style is false all the way down, and I'm not sure. So if it's sending me a false, that means it's a bit, which, guess, I don't know if that makes sense. Name style true or false. Whatever, I guess. So in the person table itself, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4 names. A numeric, an external key. That's going to be very important. I call this an identifier. And then we'll have the row GUIDs and an event. So another identifier and an event. Sweet. Okay. Damn it. Well, that's why I'm hitting the wrong keys. I hate when you're typing and your just hand shifts just a little bit. So in the example that I pasted here, this is a PST event non-system versioning created. So if I come over to my system, just because I know what it's looking for, do select star from table value function get event. And that's how I know I'm looking at the event piece. I'm going to say the system owns it. And I'll get this specific type ID back to let me know what it actually is. Because this is how we're going to be classifying a lot of stuff. See what do I have in name? Reddit name, username, full name. So I do have a lot of different things. And they're all just generic, just a generic name type item. Sometimes there are different types of names when the data is coming in. But for the most part, full, first, last, middle, suffix, and I think those are what I have, right? First name, middle name, last name. Why did I think I have 4? Oh, name style. Just threw me off, but name style's false. So first, last, and then middle. I'll just reorganize this. So as that JSON data is coming in, I'm basically going to tell it to filter or to pass all this information forward to that type ID, which will store it in the people name table. And these two have to switch. think any other information after that. So I have a business identity, and this would be a people identifier. I want to say this is an external key, and it's the primary key, not like a foreign key or an additional key. That will give me some more ways to handle this. Person type is going to be a special case, PEO flag. Doesn't matter. Guess this is a name flag. It's a name style flag. But I think this refers to first or last name first or something like that. So I'm going to say last name first. Email promotion. What it should be is this is an integer of 0, 1, and 2, where 0 is nothing, 1 is third party or just my company, and 2 is third party and my company. But there's no just third party, not my company promotion. This should actually be 2 individual flags, but the idea for importing data is we're not going to clean this data. We're going to import this data and then query it to make sure it looks like, we can basically check our data with what's imported by comparing the data set. So this would be a people numeric assigned. Actually, yeah, who knows? Identifier. Modified date is a people event. It's a non-system versioning modified. And I want to make sure non-system versioning. Okay. I just want to make sure I match this. I have versioning set up. I have databases that store all of the history, like every time something happens. Oh, that's the actual database. So it's a different kind of versioning. I store the record, whether it was inserted, we're updating it, but it looks like this is mainly ingestion, no updates yet. So we want to make sure that when we say this is a created date, what it actually means is not our created date. We will have our own, so we want to specify that it's non-system and it's a versioning date. And person type, I need to think about that for a moment. I have an identifier, because I know I've just been in the system so long. Now I'm questioning myself. I believe this is the tenant, and this is the type. Oh, there we go. Mapping, tenant, type. Excellent. So I'm saying this is a type of identifier underneath Adventureworks person. This is a flag. We have some names. Email promotion. It's a numeric. Another identifier. 56. 51 is an event. That's the owner of my client, Adventureworks. What should I do this as? Should I give it a text? Because it's not referencing anything. I think I'll give it a text. If this was an ID, it would make it easier because I have a person, realm, class, family, type, and I could somehow relate those two. But this isn't an ID, and there's no real description except for in the documentation. It doesn't give us any sort of information. So my key names would not be 2 characters. You want to make sure that you can read them. You don't want, I think person type is just EM or something. But this looks pretty good. So that means that's text, and that is 56. So I'm going to stick this data back in my mapping table. Excellent. So I'm going to copy this and kind of work in a, okay, here we go. A new area, because this, I don't want to get a, out of memory exception, which I actually might. So this procedure is generating a select statement to call the Adventureworks database and the person.person table, and we're calling it by a key name. Inside this, I'm saying if you have a JSON output flag, go ahead and redirect it. I'll basically call something actually no. This is what I'll call. I'll either get this or I won't. This data will be empty or it will be present because scripting, like executing a script, we're just going to use a JSON output. It's going to do something. The script itself is going to do something, or it's going to give me a return. And I'm going to try to adapt that web mentality where my responses are in JSON. So I can make a script that's Python. Or whatever. It'll execute it using execute external scripts, and maybe it sends me a JSON response back of pass, fail, whatever, and that's what I'll get out of here. So this is the person. Let's see, person JSON. I love these snippets. I want the value. And I'm going to keep this separate. So the top section I already know is working. Now I'm basically trying to create something that's going to iterate through the JSON being returned. So I could say, come on. I have a JSON element. Awesome. Let's say top 15. Excellent. So as I'm iterating through this JSON, I'm going to pass it to something. So this will be an ingestion procedure. Actually be tenant, it would be project, domain. Let's see, oh. Ingestion variables. This is the owner, and my domain would be person. So through these elements, I get my data back. Excellent. So I'm iterating through the element itself. And if I open that element, I can get some more information on that. So let's say this is where mapping type ID equals. Would it matter at this point? Yes, I think so. Mapping name source equals at so. Oh. So I dynamically generate a query, execute it, get JSON on the output, iterate through the JSON itself. Each element represents a specific thing that needs to go wherever. So this will be the beginning of my ingestion procedure, end of ingestion. So in this procedure, I will basically be getting that JSON element, just a normal element that's going to be coming in the form of one object. A key and a value. So as I'm iterating through that, I need to figure out where it's going to go. Oh, now this needs to go up. Identifier text. I should actually do this just because that will help us look at this better. So what the value is and where it wants to be redirected. Or what its classification is. Now I need to see where it wants to be redirected. So that would be from here. Where it's going and what it's classified as. So now one of the bigger pieces is, since we work in patterns, this should not matter what, this should only matter if this is a domain or reference data. So I should be able to build a procedure that will automatically recognize whether the incoming data falls into one of two categories. One of those categories being domain, which is something like this. Essentially all of this table will look identical to this table, except a couple of name changes, just because that's how that works. I won't be able to get them all on the same screen, but just how the pattern is: equipment measure ID, and equipment ID will be replaced with PEO people, GRP group, whatever it is. But all the procedures follow that same pattern, where all of the columns, all of the data that we're inserting is the same, so I should be able to dynamically choose which procedure I'm going to call and fill the variables accordingly. And the second shape we have is just a reference shape, which we don't have very many of. We don't have any of them right now, it looks like. Nope, even rule. Word. Nope. Well, that's pretty cool. I do have some in system. Reference data do not have those shared attributes, the larger defined item. It just comes in a database realm class, realm class family type and an untyped item type shape. So it looks like we're just dealing with domain data, which that's going to be really helpful. Oh. I wish these would notify me. I am not. So no, I would only use a schema as DBO, it's database owner. I would never use these schemas. This is Adventureworks that's doing that. Man, I wonder how do I get this to notify me? I just got to set up a second monitor. That's it. That sucks. Oh, but you learn. So let's see. So I would need... Oh yeah, I want this. That's all I want. So I don't need to call the tree. This is going to kind of let me sort the incoming data. Say... Nice. So I actually don't have these set up. No problems. It's just defining what you want in your system. Ref. Identifier. Realm. People identifier. Realm of 2. Realm of 2. External identifier. I say external here. And I got external here. Family. Let's see, my external under people is 6. I have primary key, so I'm going to change this to key. I'm not using any of this. And type. Eight. Business identity. I see. This will be a key. And then external GUID and row. External key. External. Nine. Oh. Yeah, that would help. GUID row. Excellent. So basically what is happening is how the pattern is going to unfold from here is I have a people table. I will have the person in here. Because the first thing I want to do is get the primary key identifier, because if I can, from the JSON, pull a primary key identifier, no matter what it is, if it's a GUID, if it's a whatever that primary key that I'm looking for is, that will allow me to figure out if it exists in my core table, so I can create that record if it doesn't. If it does, I'll be able to get that translation between the two. And by getting that translation, I can immediately take the piece of data. So I have my identifier here. I basically just need the who it belongs to, my customer, who it belongs to, the identifier type, is this primary key or a row GUID, and the actual value will go in here. And the rest of it is basically owned by the system. Is this active? Do I trust this? So I might probably not trust this importing stuff because it's coming from a data source I don't particularly trust. Or if I've built my own, maybe I do trust it. Or if I'm talking with a well-known data broker, maybe I do trust this data. Because there's really a difference between whether the system can use it or it can be trusted or not. And the rest of this stuff is just system information that we will not be covering yet. So if I can go through here, get that specific information. I should be able. Keep going. This is where it's going to get excellent. So there's a pattern here. And we can execute on that pattern. Actually bring that stuff out. Let's see, ingestion is all right here. So I want to create some SQL. It'll be a get type ID. And so system built on a pattern. We as good developers are very consistent with how we do things. Because of that, essentially, I can make this more dynamic. Replacing that subject is what I call it. And we will be consistent. Excellent. So we're already building something that's generating our scripts for us. Oh. Very important thing when you are iterating through a cursor, you do want to clear your variables. This one's a force clear, but this one I might, the way that SQL handles output, I might not actually get a null. In fact, I know some of these don't exist. Okay, so that's good. I was hoping I would get a null. If it's not found right here, it won't give me a null. So, whoa. I'll make sure I null this out because I do want to make, I don't want it to hold on to any data from the previous iteration. So now this code is cycling through, trying to find the type ID for whatever was defined. So let's just see what it's executing. Not go into too much detail, but we can see it's getting flags, name, numerics. It's just cycling through what's happening for each record in each row. So some of them I know I do not have, and some of them I have. So now our code is smaller, but it forces us to continue to be consistent. Let's see what I want to do from here. So this would be another pattern. But it's a little bit of a bigger pattern. Come on now. So like I said, for any of these pieces of information, we essentially just need who is renting space in our database, the header key, what's the identifier external primary key, what is that? Do we have it in our system? The type ID, no matter if it's event or whatnot, and a specific number of columns that change based on whether you're an event, you're in the identifier, but doesn't change if you're in people or part or group or anything. So we already know where it's going to go in terms of what type ID I need. And we know that when we get to this piece, we will already have our key because we are going to look at the class and say, hey, you are a person. look at my person external key primary for not just this mapping, but for what I currently have stored underneath you, the owner, the client that's using the system. Do I have an intersection? If I have an intersection, then I have a key that I'm going to use. So, but then there's that secondary pattern because we're forcing everything to move through a specific path where these versioning procedures will record history and all DML actions are stored, so we have that versioning in place. But, oh, and this is update. So this is actually what I wanted. And this pattern is too big to fit on the same screen. The pattern is going to be select the data, where the person event type ID equals at event type ID. Very basic pattern. Select the information where we know where it's supposed to go in the event table. We know the person and we know the client. Do I have any data? This will get filled. So if my primary key for the event table is null, I'm going to insert. Else, I'm going to want to update. And because we have a lot of columns in this system that are used by the system itself, this has to be the pattern. We have to select the data so we can keep this information that's not required by the insert statement. The insert doesn't require any security that have been placed on this record or any display or archived information that have been placed on this record. So when the update comes into play, or when we execute the update, we essentially want to keep everything that we had from the select statement except for the values themselves. That's because maybe if we say by default this is active but I don't trust this on these imports, and I go back in and I'm updating this record, maybe I've already said, you know what, I do trust this, and I don't want to overwrite that. So the pattern is see if you have that record, and if you don't have that record, then insert it with your defaults. But if you do have that record, you only want to update the value itself. So for event, this is the only thing that changes. For identifier, it will only be the identifier itself. So what we're going to want to do is basically create, unfortunately, several, but fortunately, that's basically it. We want to create a procedure for each of these domains. And because we're doing it for each domain, we actually are adding to the system as a whole. It's not very specific to this ETL project. We're going to need it for every time we add a new shared attribute. We're going to want this code to be automatically created so we can really focus on data-driven stuff. So this live stream is basically just exploring, going from A to B. All right, here's how to make this extremely patternistic. And this key name will basically tell me where it's going to be filtered. So theoretically, I can have this, including this, from here to here as my procedure. Dynamic shared attribute upsert. So what I can do is incoming, and even a procedure above this that will filter it to the proper procedure. I know I have this data incoming. Because of that data, I will have this output. Maybe these aren't the proper names to use because maybe it's not just mapping. Maybe I want to just create a generic thing where, I mean, that's how we want to do this system is you're going to dynamically get me a type ID for the incoming parameters and the subject area. It will give me that ID. And then since this is very specific to domain, I can say PEO people. Oh. Actually be domain. Yep. I messed up. Excellent. Just because it's tokenized, it's going to be even harder to read. So when I look at this, you know, I did replace the people with all of these different tokens. So I have to say, hey, this is where it's going. But if I go down to recipe event, I still have that same structure, recipe event type ID. Oh, because this is the view. So no matter what's happening, recipe event group, recipe event group ID, recipe event group ID. Oh. Oh, I see. I'm comfortable with that. I see what's going on now. It's recipe event recipe ID. This is the header ID. So that would be the same as my where clause. Recipe event recipe ID. So we would probably take a couple of these out from the select since they're passed in as wheres. Recipe event type ID. Recipe event type ID. Group event type ID. It's just the same pattern. So these are incoming where clauses. This would be the actual data that I want. Technically, I don't want this data either. Give them the sequence information for the header record, because this is the primary key. If the primary key is null, create or update. I'm going to be lazy too. For tokenizing, this formatting is extremely important. Awesome. Oh, keep getting rid of it. Sweet. So for the most part, all of these will be overwritten. If flag ints, I'll have 3 pieces. Everything is in a pattern. But declare add is all the same length. Why do you keep pushing it? So recipe event ID. Recipe. Oh, I know. Recipe event group ID. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I got this. Recipe event date. Yeah, recipe event date. Where are you? Yep. Okay. Oh, now it's gross again. Sweet. I may not need the tenant. I'll need the primary key. I'll already know the parent, and this will tell me my type. So the rest of this in a dynamically executed statement, this should take care of all of my events. Select for, person, whatever. If that ID is null, go ahead and insert that data. I will already have my generic and we'll say we will name this after our relationship structure. So we just have generic IDs coming in. Generic group ID tenant. Generic parent ID. We will keep the event type ID as is. This will be incoming variables specific to event. By default, I'm not going to put any sequence or display order, but these will be my values that I will also have to replace right here. So this is basically the entire event chain to dynamically execute and sort between whatever domain. So I'm going to have to, over the course of this week, create one for each of these, which will probably end with me hijacking another procedure like the view building procedure or the versioning procedure builder for my system. Because those patterns are already there, so I just need to make sure that when my procedures are built and the subject that's being built is a domain, is a shared attribute to create something that looks like this. Actually, is it on both sides? Nope. Here we go. Clear all of it out. I just want this to see if the select executed, because the rest was completed through automatically generated snippets anyways. So that should work. Let's see, 34. Oh, that's crazy, right? Can only program for so long. All right. Well, I will keep going every Saturday, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. I'll cut it early. I don't see many people on, but this is, hey, just keep going. That's what you're supposed to do. And maybe during the week I'll pick this back up and start filling these out so I can start dynamically importing Adventureworks through this JSON procedure. Just get as much dynamic SQL as possible, because if it's dynamic, that means the code or the IDs at least are stored somewhere, and you can optimize it dynamically. Just create a self-repairing, self-optimizing system. But thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.